down. License and registration, now.
Officer, I live here. This is my home. Why am I being stopped?
Step out of the vehicle. This car matches a stolen vehicle report.
It was a Tuesday afternoon, specifically 2:15 in the afternoon, when the silence of an upscale suburban neighborhood was broken by the sound of a police siren. Judge Patricia Williams, a 52-year-old federal judge, had just turned her black Mercedes sedan into the driveway of her home. The house was a symbol of her decades of hard work, a white colonial structure with a manicured lawn that she had purchased only 3 years prior. She had spent the day presiding over a complex civil rights case at the federal courthouse, a bitter irony considering what was about to happen. As Judge Williams turned off the ignition, she noticed a police cruiser blocking the end of her driveway. She felt no immediate alarm. Police patrols were common in her neighborhood, and she viewed them as a sign of safety. She gathered her leather briefcase from the passenger seat, preparing to exit the vehicle and greet the officer. However, the situation escalated instantly. Officer Williams Thompson, a man who had been on the force for 8 years, slammed his car door and marched up the driveway. His hand rested on his service weapon, and his expression was aggressive and suspicious. Judge Williams rolled down her window, expecting a polite inquiry. Instead, Officer Thompson barked a demand to see her license and registration. His tone was not professional, it was combative. When Judge Williams calmly asked why she was being stopped, explaining that she was in her own driveway, Thompson accused her of driving a stolen vehicle. He claimed her car matched the description of a vehicle reported stolen in the area. Judge Williams pointed to her house, just 20 feet away, and stated clearly that she lived there. Thompson ignored this visual evidence entirely. The tension spiked when Thompson demanded she step out of the vehicle. Judge Williams, drawing on 25 years of legal experience, knew that reacting with anger could be dangerous. She decided to remain perfectly calm. She stepped out slowly, keeping her hands visible. She told the officer her name and her title, Federal Judge Patricia Williams. She asked him to verify her license plate against the stolen car report. This reasonable request seemed to infuriate Thompson. He twisted her arm behind her back and reached for his handcuffs. "You are being detained for vehicle theft and resisting arrest," he announced. Judge Williams was shocked. She had not resisted. She had been compliant. As the cold metal of the handcuffs locked around her wrists, she repeated her request. "Please check my identification. My credentials are in the car." Thompson ignored her. He did not look at her judicial identification card in her purse. He did not look at the court documents in her briefcase on the ground. He simply marched a federal judge down her own driveway, in full view of the street, and shoved her into the back of his patrol car. The dashboard camera was recording every second of this unlawful seizure. For 35 minutes, Judge Patricia Williams sat in the cramped back seat of the police cruiser. The air conditioning was running, but the humiliation made her feel suffocated. She was a woman who commanded respect in federal courtrooms, a person who decided the fate of others, yet now she was powerless. The handcuffs were tight, cutting into her skin and leaving red marks that would remain visible for days. She watched through the plexiglass divider as Officer Thompson stood outside, speaking into his radio with an air of arrogance. The neighborhood, usually quiet at this hour, began to wake up to the commotion. Mrs. Eleanor Davis, who lived directly across the street, had been tending to her garden when the police car arrived. She had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years and knew Judge Williams well. She had watched the judge move in 3 years ago and knew exactly who she was. Mrs. Davis saw the arrest unfold and immediately realized a terrible mistake was being made. She called out to her husband, a retired attorney, who told her to start recording. Mrs. Davis pulled out her smartphone and began filming. She captured the image of her neighbor, a distinguished jurist, locked in a police car like a common criminal. Meanwhile, another neighbor, James Mitchell, was walking his dog down the sidewalk. He stopped when he saw the scene. He recognized Judge Williams immediately because his own brother had appeared before her in a civil case 2 years prior. James approached Officer Thompson cautiously. "Officer, you are making a mistake," James said. "That woman lives here. She is a federal judge." Officer Thompson did not welcome the information. He turned on James with hostility, telling him to back away and mind his own business. Thompson claimed he was following proper procedure for a felony stop. When James persisted, trying to explain that he knew the woman personally, Thompson threatened to arrest him for interfering with a police investigation. James backed off, but stayed close enough to witness the events. Inside the car, Judge Williams saw her neighbors trying to help. She felt a mix of gratitude and shame. She had worked her entire life to be a pillar of the community, and now she was being treated like a threat to it. She continued to speak to Officer Thompson whenever he came near the car, calmly stating her identity and asking for a supervisor. Thompson dismissed her claims as the lies of a guilty suspect. He radioed for backup, telling dispatch he had a suspect in custody for grand theft auto who was being uncooperative and making wild claims about being a judge. He seemed convinced that he had caught a major criminal, completely blind to the reality that he was destroying his own career with every passing minute. The arrival of backup units turned the quiet residential street into a spectacle of flashing red and blue lights. 2 additional patrol cars screeched to a halt, blocking the road. Neighbors were now coming out onto their porches, phone cameras raised, documenting the scene. Judge Patricia Williams had been detained for nearly 40 minutes by the time Officer Sarah Martinez arrived on the scene. Officer Martinez was a veteran with 12 years of experience, and unlike Thompson, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. Martinez approached Thompson, who was still agitated and defensive. He explained that he had caught a car thief who was refusing to cooperate. However, when Martinez asked for the specific details of the stolen vehicle report, Thompson's answers were vague. He could not provide a matching license plate number. Martinez looked at the black Mercedes in the driveway, then at the well-dressed woman sitting in the back of the squad car. The profile did not fit. Martinez walked over to the vehicle and leaned down to speak through the window. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" Martinez asked. "I am Federal Judge Patricia Williams," the judge replied, her voice steady but firm. "I live in this house. My identification is in my purse on the front seat of my car." Martinez believed her. She walked back to Thompson and suggested they check the woman's ID before transporting her to the station. Thompson argued against it, insisting she was lying, but Martinez overruled him. She went to the Mercedes, retrieved the purse, and found the judicial identification card. It had the judge's photo and clearly stated her position. Martinez then radioed dispatch to run a check on the name. "Dispatch, run a check on Patricia Williams," she said. A few moments later, the dispatcher's voice came back over the radio, tense and urgent. "Officer, that subject is a confirmed federal judge. Status is valid. Proceed with caution." The color drained from Officer Thompson's face, but he did not apologize. Instead, he doubled down, complaining that she should have shown her ID sooner, ignoring the fact that he had refused to let her. Martinez ignored him and immediately opened the back door of the cruiser. She helped Judge Williams out and uncuffed her. "I am so sorry, Your Honor," Martinez said. Judge Williams rubbed her wrists. She did not yell. She simply asked for the badge numbers of every officer present. Thompson, realizing the gravity of his error, tried to approach her. He mumbled that it was a misunderstanding and suggested they could just forget about it. Judge Williams looked him in the eye. "This was not a misunderstanding," she said coldly. "This was a violation of my constitutional rights." She gathered her belongings and walked into her home, leaving Thompson standing in the driveway, watching his career dissolve in real time. That evening, the Williams household was filled with outrage. Judge Williams's husband, a respected physician, wanted to go to the media immediately. Her daughter, a first-year law student, was in tears, furious at the treatment her mother had endured. But Judge Williams remained the calmest person in the room. She knew that emotion would not win a legal battle. Evidence would. She sat down in her study and began to write a detailed account of the incident while her memory was fresh. She noted the time, the weather, the dialogue, and the specific actions of Officer Thompson. The next morning, for the first time in 3 years, Judge Williams called in sick to the courthouse. She could not preside over cases while she was now a victim in one. Instead, she contacted David Chen, a renowned civil rights attorney known for taking on difficult police misconduct cases. Chen came to her home, and they spent hours reviewing the details. When Judge Williams described the dashboard camera that was facing her driveway, Chen knew they had a winning case. "The video will be the key," Chen told her. "It will show his demeanor versus yours." News of the arrest began to leak out into the legal community. Attorneys, clerks, and fellow judges were stunned. The idea that one of their own, a federal judge, could be handcuffed in her own driveway was terrifying to them. It shattered the illusion that their status protected them from racial profiling. Meanwhile, at the police station, Officer Thompson was trying to cover his tracks. He filed an incident report that was completely sanitized. He wrote that the suspect was evasive and matched a description. He omitted the fact that neighbors had vouched for her. He omitted her repeated requests to check her ID. He wrote it as a routine stop that resulted in a release. He had no idea that the department's internal mechanisms were already turning against him. Sergeant David Morrison, Thompson's supervisor, read the report and frowned. He knew Judge Williams by reputation. The idea that she would be driving a stolen car was ludicrous. Morrison pulled the digital file for the dashboard camera footage. He sat alone in his office and pressed play. What he saw made his stomach turn. He saw a calm, professional woman being bullied by his officer. He heard Thompson's aggressive tone. He saw the neighbors being threatened. Morrison knew immediately that this was not just a mistake. It was a lawsuit waiting to happen. He picked up the phone and called the chief of police. The following morning, Chief Rebecca Walsh sat in her office staring at the screen of her laptop. Sergeant Morrison had just shown her the footage. The room was silent. Chief Walsh had spent 6 years trying to rebuild the department's relationship with the minority community, and in 35 minutes, Officer Thompson had destroyed it all. He arrested a federal judge, she said, almost in a whisper, in her own driveway. The department's legal counsel, Michael Rodriguez, was pacing the room. It is not just that she is a judge, Chief. It is the lack of probable cause. He didn't even check the license plate first. This is a clear Fourth Amendment violation. And given the demographics, we are looking at a racial profiling claim that we cannot defend. Chief Walsh made the decision immediately. Pull him off the street, place him on administrative leave pending an investigation, and get ready for the press, because this is going to be a nightmare. Later that day, Officer Thompson was called into the station. He walked in expecting a reprimand, perhaps a retraining session. Instead, he was stripped of his badge and gun. He was told to go home and wait for a call. For the first time, the reality of his situation began to sink in. He called his union representative, but even the union lawyer sounded skeptical after hearing the details. Across town, David Chen was finalizing the complaint. He did not wait. 1 week after the incident, he filed a federal lawsuit on behalf of Judge Williams. The lawsuit named Officer Thompson, the police department, and the city. It alleged violations of the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure, and the 14th Amendment, equal protection. It claimed that Judge Williams was targeted solely because of her race. The filing hit the local news like a bomb. "Federal Judge Sues Police" was the headline on every channel. Reporters camped out on Judge Williams's lawn. The video footage, which had been released as part of the public record, was played on a loop. The image of the judge in handcuffs became a symbol of a broken system. The public support was overwhelming, but the police union remained silent, knowing there was no way to defend what was on that tape. The internal affairs investigation was led by Captain Lisa Rodriguez, a no-nonsense investigator known for her thoroughness. She did not just look at the arrest of Judge Williams, she pulled Officer Thompson's entire personnel file. What she found was a disturbing pattern that had been ignored for years. Over his 8-year career, Officer Thompson had received 14 citizen complaints. 12 of them involved allegations of racial bias or excessive force against minority motorists. Captain Rodriguez dug deeper into the statistics. She analyzed his traffic stops and found that Thompson stopped black drivers at a rate 4 times higher than white drivers, despite patrolling a district that was predominantly white. Furthermore, his hit rate, the percentage of stops that resulted in finding contraband, was no higher for black drivers than for white ones. This proved that his suspicion was not based on police intuition or evidence, but on bias. "He is fishing," Captain Rodriguez noted in her report. "He is stopping people based on race, hoping to find a crime." The investigation also revealed a failure of supervision. Thompson's annual reviews were all rated satisfactory or above average. His supervisors had signed off on his conduct year after year, dismissing the complaints as the cost of doing business in a tough neighborhood. The early warning system, a software program designed to flag officers with too many complaints, had failed to trigger an alert, or worse, the alerts had been overridden. As these details emerged in the discovery phase of the lawsuit, Judge Williams's attorney, David Chen, realized the case was bigger than just one bad apple. It was about a systemic failure. He deposed Thompson, who came across as arrogant and unrepentant. Thompson insisted he followed his gut, a phrase that Chen tore apart in the deposition. "Your gut seems to only be suspicious of black people," Chen said during the questioning. The evidence was damning. The department had not just employed a biased officer, they had protected him. They had ignored the red flags until he targeted someone with the power to fight back. This revelation shifted the focus of the lawsuit from a single incident to a demand for departmental reform. The city realized they were not just defending a traffic stop, they were on trial for their entire culture of policing. As the lawsuit progressed, the pressure on the city administration became unbearable. The Department of Justice announced they were opening a preliminary inquiry into the police department's practices, a move that terrified the mayor. A federal investigation could lead to a consent decree, stripping the city of control over its own police force. Mayor Jennifer Thompson, no relation to the officer, held a press conference. She looked tired. She announced that the city was committed to transparency and accountability. But words were not enough. The public demanded action. Protests were organized outside City Hall, with demonstrators holding signs that read, "Justice for Judge Williams," and "Stop Racial Profiling." 3 weeks after the arrest, the internal investigation concluded. The findings were unequivocal. Officer Thompson had violated multiple policies, including those regarding warrantless arrests, de-escalation, and professional conduct. Chief Walsh did not wait for a hearing. She signed the termination papers immediately. Officer Thompson was fired on a Tuesday morning. The news broke instantly. He was stripped of his pension eligibility and barred from ever working in law enforcement in the state again. In an interview with a local paper, Thompson played the victim, claiming he was a political sacrifice. But the public had seen the video. There was no sympathy. However, firing Thompson was not the end. The lawsuit was still active. Judge Williams made it clear she was not just looking for an apology or Thompson's badge. She wanted to ensure this never happened to another citizen who did not have her legal knowledge or status. She demanded policy changes, mandatory body cameras for all officers, independent oversight for citizen complaints, and rigorous anti-bias training. The city's lawyers tried to get the case dismissed, arguing qualified immunity, a legal doctrine that protects officers from personal liability. But the federal judge presiding over the case denied the motion. He ruled that a reasonable officer would have known that arresting a compliant person in their own driveway without verifying their identity was a violation of clearly established law. This ruling paved the way for a jury trial, a prospect that terrified the city's insurance carriers. The termination of Officer Thompson and the ongoing lawsuit created a ripple effect that touched every corner of the community. For Judge Williams, the victory of Thompson's firing was bittersweet. She returned to the bench, but the dynamic had changed. Defense attorneys looked at her differently, knowing she now understood their clients' perspectives in a visceral way. She found herself scrutinizing police testimony more rigorously than before. The community, emboldened by the judge's stand, began to speak up. Other victims of Officer Thompson came forward. A local mechanic told a story of being held at gunpoint by Thompson during a routine traffic stop. A college student recounted how Thompson had searched his backpack without consent, dumping his books on the side of the road. These stories were compiled by the local newspaper, painting a portrait of a tyrant with a badge. The police department struggled to maintain morale. Good officers felt unfairly painted by Thompson's actions, while recruitment numbers plummeted. Who would want to join a department that was national news for racism? Chief Walsh invited community leaders to a town hall meeting to discuss the path forward. It was a contentious meeting. Residents shouted their grievances, releasing years of pent-up anger. Judge Williams did not attend the protests or the town hall. She maintained her judicial dignity, speaking only through her legal filings. However, privately, she struggled. The trauma of the event lingered. She would flinch when she saw a police car in her rearview mirror. She had nightmares about the handcuffs. Her husband urged her to see a therapist, and she eventually agreed, recognizing that even strong people need help processing trauma. The case also had financial implications for the city. The legal fees were mounting, reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars. The police union, usually a powerful political force, abandoned Thompson completely, refusing to pay for his personal defense in the civil suit. Thompson was now unemployed, facing a massive lawsuit, and his family was being harassed. They were forced to put their house on the market and move to a different state, fleeing the consequences of his actions. 18 months had passed since the arrest. The case was scheduled for trial in federal court. The city was desperate to settle. They knew that putting Judge Williams on the stand in front of a jury would be a disaster. She was articulate, credible, and sympathetic. A jury would likely award her millions in punitive damages. The city's lawyers requested a mediation session. They met in a conference room in a high-rise downtown. The city offered $250,000 to settle the case. David Chen, representing Judge Williams, laughed at the offer. "You destroyed a federal judge's reputation and violated her rights," Chen said. "We are not here for nuisance value. We are starting at $2 million. The negotiation was tense. The city argued that Thompson was a rogue actor, and the department shouldn't be punished for one man's actions. Chen countered with the data showing the department had ignored complaints for years. "He wasn't a rogue actor," Chen said. "He was a product of your system." Judge Williams sat quietly during the negotiations. When she finally spoke, the room went silent. She told them that the money was secondary. She would not sign any agreement that did not include a court-enforceable consent decree mandating the reforms she had requested. "I don't need your money," she said. "I need your change." The city officials conferred. They knew they had no leverage. After days of back and forth, they reached a number, $910,000. It was nearly $1 million, the largest settlement for a single police misconduct incident in the city's history. But more importantly, the city agreed to the reforms. They agreed to create a civilian review board with subpoena power. They agreed to overhaul their hiring and training practices. They agreed to an independent audit of all traffic stops for the next 5 years. Judge Williams accepted the deal. She had won. The settlement was announced at a press conference. Judge Williams stood at the podium, flanked by her family and her attorney. She looked strong, the red marks on her wrists long gone, but the memory of them fueling her words. "Justice is not just about punishment," she told the assembled reporters. "It is about prevention. No citizen should ever have to fear those sworn to protect them." The headlines the next day read, "Jury awards $910,000, though technically was a settlement. The public saw it as a verdict against the system." The impact was immediate. The police department implemented the new training programs within weeks. The new Civilian Review Board held its first meeting a month later. Officer Thompson, now living in obscurity 2 states away, was working in construction. He had lost his career, his pension, and his reputation. He was a cautionary tale for every other officer in the country. Police academies began using the video of the arrest as a training tool, a what not to do scenario that every cadet had to study. Judge Williams took the $910,000 and did something extraordinary. She did not buy a new car or a vacation home. She used the money to establish the Williams Foundation for Justice. The foundation provided legal scholarships for minority students and funded a legal clinic to help low-income citizens fight wrongful arrests. 5 years later, the neighborhood was quiet again. Judge Williams still lived in the white colonial house. She still drove her black Mercedes. But when she saw a police car now, she didn't just see safety or a threat. She saw an institution that she had forced to be better. She had turned her 35 minutes of humiliation into a legacy of justice. The traffic stop that was supposed to put her in her place had instead changed the world around her. In the end, the system worked, but only because someone strong enough was there to force it to. Justice had prevailed, not because it was given, but because it was demanded.